Welcome back, everybody. In this video, I'm going to compare the cameras on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and on the iPhone 12 Pro Max. I've been taking a bunch of pictures with all of their cameras. I've been taking videos, selfies, slow-mo clips, and much, much more because I want to show you how big or how small the difference is between the past 4 Pro iPhones, so you can make a better decision on what iPhone you should upgrade to, or whether you should upgrade your iPhone in the first place. As always, you have an Amazon link for all of these phones down below in the description.
As always, let's begin by talking about the main camera, where, as you can see, there is a very big difference between the iPhone 12 Pro Max and the rest of the phones. It has less detail, it has less dynamic range, and noticeably less bokeh on the images. This is because the iPhone 12 Pro Max has a considerably smaller sensor than the rest of the phones, which, as many of you know, affects all of the variables that I just talked about. The smaller the sensor, the less light that gets in, so you get less detail, less dynamic range, and less bokeh. What's actually very surprising is how little the difference is between the 13 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max. I mean, I was expecting for there to be a difference between the older model and the newer model, but I was not expecting for there to be no difference at all between the 3 latest models of iPhone. That's actually pretty insane. Oh, and I know the 14 Pro Max and 15 Pro Max have 48 megapixels instead of 12, but I'm sorry to say, my friends, that that's not going to affect the image quality because Apple is binning down these 48 megapixels into 12, so you get as much light as you would get on the older phones with less megapixels, but bigger megapixels. So yeah, there's no difference. This is not going to affect the image quality unless you enable those 48 megapixels in the settings and you take pictures with insanely good lighting conditions. Then we have a periscope camera or zoom camera, which, same thing, is a little bit worse on the iPhone 12 Pro Max, noticeably worse when looking at the images. And well, it is also the least zoomy camera because it only has a 2.5x zoom as opposed to 3x on the iPhone 13 and 14 and 5x on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But besides this, which is very subjective, some people like more zoom, some people like less zoom. What I can tell you for sure is that because the iPhone 12 Pro Max has a way smaller sensor than the newer phones, the quality, detail, dynamic range, and well, all the variables are going to be affected negatively on this phone as opposed to the rest. You can actually see this very well when taking photos at night. The photos just don't look as sharp, as good, as detailed as they do on the newer phones. But once again, on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, and 15 Pro Max, everything looks identical. And I couldn't forget about the ultra-wide camera, which, well, it's also the most boring camera on the phone because it is pretty much the same on all phones. They all have 12 megapixels, about the same sensor size, and, well, images look identical, pretty much identical. In fact, I've been showing you the photos of the 15 Pro Max on the 12 Pro Max slot and the photos from the 12 Pro Max on the 15 Pro Max slot, and you didn't really notice, right? It was not like surprising. It didn't call your attention that, oh my God, the 15 Pro looks worse than the 12 Pro, right? Well, that's because they all look identical. And don't tell me in the comments that you did notice, okay? In fact, let's do an experiment. I am showing you all the photos right now, maybe in the correct spots or slots, maybe in the wrong slots or spots. Please tell me in the comments, do you think the photos are correctly aligned, or am I tricking you? Am I showing the 14 Pro Max photos on the 13 Pro and the 15 Pro Max on the 12 Pro?
Then when it comes to video using the main camera, we can see something very similar to what we saw with photos using the main camera. There's a very big difference between the iPhone 12 and the rest of the phones. Maybe we can't really see a big difference in detail because all of these phones can shoot at 4K, and because Apple is very good at, managing video, HDR, dynamic range technology, so every video looks good. But in every other way, we can notice a noticeable improvement with the newer phones as opposed to the iPhone 12. We get more dynamic range, we get better colors, more bokeh effect, which is the main advantage of having a bigger sensor. We get more cinematic video, if you may. And to be honest, this is a little bit sad because, yes, of course, I was expecting for there to be a difference between the iPhone 12 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max, but I wasn't expecting this difference to be so abrupt. The iPhone 12 should have been a little bit worse than the 13, and the 13 a little bit worse than the 14, and the 14 a little bit worse than the 15, but no, there's like this big shift. Then when it comes to the selfie camera, we get a similar situation here because we notice a very big leap between the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 14. In this case, we have two older, worse phones and two newer, better phones. And this is because on the iPhone 14, we got a newer, better selfie camera with autofocus. That's going to give us a little bit more dynamic range, a little bit better colors, and if we get close to the camera, maybe a little bit more bokeh. But I mean, it's just absurdly low bokeh effect. These are all still very tiny cameras, so don't expect any level of cinematic look on any of them.
Conclusion: there are improvements on the iPhone 15 Pro Max as opposed to the older models, but they are only noticeable when you compare it to old phones like the iPhone 12 Pro Max or even an older 11 Pro Max, 10s Max. If you have a new phone, I would not spend a kidney and a half to buy the 15 Pro Max based on photo and video quality because you're going to be disappointed. iPhone 15 Pro is exactly the same as the 14 Pro Max in every way possible besides the zoom camera, and it is a little bit better than the 13 Pro Max, but not enough to be noticeable, not enough for you to spend money on the new phone, or at least that's the way that I see it. As I said earlier, you have Amazon links for all of these phones in the description, and now that the video is about to end, I recommend you go check them out.